Hello, my friends. Welcome to the latest edition of Here's What We Know, the podcast of unexpected conversations. Hey, I want to thank our partners who make all of this possible. Without them, it's just not happening. Now, when I had the chance, I talked to a guy and he goes, I said, I saw the name John Ford Coley. And I said, is it possible to talk to John Ford Coley? And he goes, I'll ask. Presto, as John likes to say, he asked the right guy at the right time. How are you, John?
I'm terrific, man. How are you doing?
Dude, I'm so excited. I told you this when you and I first got it. He goes, what are we going to talk about? And I said, anything. And his response was, let's go nuclear fission. I'm like, I'm all in. I can do nuclear fission. I can go down a science rabbit hole with you like that, Chief.
There we go. We'll switch from nuclear fission to fusion and then to telomeres.
Oh, man. I'm all in. We can go down to quantum particle mechanics. I mean, the whole thing. We can go there. But I told you I was so excited because honestly, everybody has a soundtrack of their lives in their youth. And you and England Dan and John Ford Coley were the soundtrack of my life. I mean, you really are. I can't think of any time in my development where you weren't on the radio. And my brother-in-laws who were like my father, they were all in. And everything we had the 8-track tapes. Hot dog.
Gosh, you're going way back now. That was okay. The 8-track, that was just when Moses was coming down off of Mount Sinai, wasn't it? I think about that time period.
Telling you what, an 8-track tape and an idol, they both sound the same, don't they?
It's good stuff.
It was the worst thing in the world. Do you remember that? I mean, right in the middle. At nights are forever. Without you.
I remember that was the most annoying thing I think I'd ever seen in my life.
You and I are old enough that we've seen it all. I've been in radio since 1976. And when I started, it literally was records. Now, I have a 12 and a 14-year-old. Do you know what it's like trying to explain to a 14-year-old what a record is? It's crazy.
Yeah. Tell them what they have this really antiquated thing called liner notes, to where you can find out what went on the record, how it was made, who played on it. Artwork, real live artwork.
You know, that's a great thing that I've never thought about. I've never asked out of everybody I've ever talked to. I've never asked them about what goes into the liner notes. And you've been a part of that process. What is that like?
Well, the thing is that you get the backstory. You find, we'd buy the album, we'd listen to the record while we're reading the liner notes, what went on, where it was recorded, who was recording on it, the little stories and tidbits, that they would pass through there. That for me is like reading the cereal box, when you're a kid and you're reading all the stuff on the back while you're chomping down your Cheerios. That was great.
You're exactly right, because we used to love getting the notes and the liners, and we would read everything. And it didn't matter. Music, I remember reading the Richard Pryor liner notes from albums that I cannot say the name to no longer. You can't say the name of them, Mark. But I would love everything about it. And you're right. There was no social media. It's the only way we get to find out anything about you guys.
Yeah. That was how you found out about people. That and the teen magazines. And
were you guys ever featured in the teen magazines?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about it is that it's all lies. They just make things up as they go along. And so you kind of get into that. I tell people my funniest story is when the guys go, well, we had landed in New York. The guy from the radio station or the television station met us at the airport. We're having an intense conversation going on just about deeper subjects. He says, okay, you guys ready? They hit the button and he goes, now tell me, was it kind of disappointing that, you didn't have like a big fan base come to the airport? And I went, what? It's like, boy, that went to hell in a hurry, didn't it? It's just like, we're talking about, important things and suddenly it's that.
Oh
It's
my.
like, goodness.
See, that was the standard you guys were held up to, right? For there was that time that if you did not get the Beatles coming over the pond reception, that somehow you were a failure. By the way, we're selling millions of albums, and we've got number one songs all over the radio. Does that count? Yeah, but look at the year.
Yeah. First time we went to Japan, we had a number one song there. All of a sudden, there's all these people when we landed. We're looking at it, and the guy's waving at us. We go, oh, that must be the driver. Oh, look, he brought his daughter with him. Isn't that nice? And then all of a sudden, all these signs pop up and everything. And we go, okay, I've been on a 10-hour flight. I haven't had a chance to brush my teeth. I hope nobody wants to come up and hug me. So it's like,
Well, because it's such an amazing journey. You and Dan Seals went to high school together, right?
yeah, uh-huh. Dan was a year older than I was. And actually, Dan was in the work program. He wasn't in school most of the time. He got out at like 10 o'clock and he would go to a job. I'm a year behind him. So, we didn't even see one another at school.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And you guys got in this group. I love the name Southwest FOB because
Yeah.
nobody knows what FOB means anymore.
No, they don't.
But
The depth of most people I've discovered is about as long as their fingernails. And that's that is.
but you and I grew up knowing FOB was freight on board.
Right.
Right. And it was first of all a train definition. And then it
Yeah.
became more as what we called them transfer trucks. Remember back in the day, if you're old enough, you called them transfer trucks. And it was FOB. What was that like? Because you hear about 15 and 16-year-olds starting a band, but usually it's not that cool. But
Well,
is
I
it
came
crazy?
in,
How was the talent level?
the talent level where I came from was really good. Dan was a saxophone player. Now, when I got into the band, they had or one of the guitar players had quit. So the other guitar player really wanted to play lead of it. And so everybody discussed that they wanted a keyboard player. Dan wanted another guitar player. So he didn't like me at all. And as a result of that, we kind of skated around one another because I'm not welcome in the band. Now, first of all, I'm a replacement. Okay. So that means that I'm not in the band really. I'm not an original member. So the other guys are original. I'm a replacement. Then we changed the name to These Few later on. Then I became original to that band. So now everybody's original in the band. Then we're playing, Young Rascals and Beach Boys and all of these other things. Then we changed it to the Southwest FOB and we were playing like Otis Redding and soul music and all that. Then we went into the psychedelic era, parachutes and black lights sort of stuff. Then we ended up playing fusion jazz. All of us, same guys, except one guy got drafted. So we had a replacement who became FOB, and then we had a trumpet player. So again, another replacement. So you got 4 of the originals, 2 replacements. We just played. We weren't trying to be stars. We had the one record that came out, the Smell of Incense. It took us regionally all over Texas. It actually got to number 62 or 66 in the nation. If you go into the Stax Museum down in Memphis, there was only 2 groups that were white on Stax, and they did a whole subdivision called Hip Label, the Southwest FOB, and their group called the Nobody Else. Well, the Nobody Else became known as Black Oak, Arkansas later on.
Wow. Hey, Jim Dandy.
Yep. So then when you go into the museum, they've got us there. And if you don't remember the name Southwest FOB, just say, can you point me to the group with the naked women on the album cover? And they go, yep, we know what you're talking about. Bingo. They take you right over. It's hilarious. So,
That's such an eclectic group of musicians. But
well, it
back in the
was.
60s and 70s, though, it really wasn't. I mean, the first thing when you're talking about that, you could have just as easily throw in a trombone and we're talking about Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. Blood, Sweat, and Tears. You had all of those kinds of groups that came out. I remember how excited I was when Young Rascals did People Just Got to Be Free. Da, 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 da. It was like, man, that's horns. Now, I'm trained classically. So all these things are something that I knew of, but very few people did. And I'm hearing all of these sounds, getting excited. I heard Chicago, heard Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And you go, man, you got some talent out there, some serious talent.
It's and just the sounds that was
Yeah.
so it was kind of all over the map. It reminds me where country is today, as far as country music. Country music, there's so many sounds of country music. Back in 70s, 80s, there was only one sound.
Right.
Well, rock and roll back in the 60s and 70s had so many sounds
Mm-hmm.
because you did have, was there the disco thing? Yeah, there was, but it wasn't everywhere. It was there, but there was still a lot of different sounds that were still coming out. And the whole jazz fusion thing, you forget about David Clayton Thomas. What a voice.
Yeah.
The first time you heard David Clayton Thomas, what'd you do?
I was listening to the horns. I really was. It's like, da, 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 bop, da, 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 bop. Jonathan Price, not Jonathan Price, the guy, the keyboard player in Animals, but Put a Spell on You. Can't think of his name. Anyway, like the organ, that sound, and you don't just hear dun 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 dun. You hear da 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 da. I mean, I'm classically trained, like I said, so those sounds to me were something that were different. It wasn't, I got you, babe, kind of thing, which was good in its own right, but it wasn't expressive enough,
Well, it was, and I say this with all due respect, it was simplistic. And there's nothing wrong with simplistic when it comes to I Got You, Babe. But when you put that up against the bands of the day, like Yes.
Yeah.
When you say keyboards and all of a sudden there's Rick Wakeman and y'all look him up. It was, you could go from I Got You, Babe to all of the stuff that was happening there.
Right. But for me, the most important element was and still is the lyrics. I mean, I love the music because the music drives the lyrics. You can have a horrible lyric and a great melody, and you got a hit. You can have a great lyric and a miserable melody, and it's going to die a miserable death because it's not supported. But man, people like Joni Mitchell, they came in during that time. We were recording on the first album. We had a German guy that was our sound engineer. His name was Henry Louis. Henry was meditative. He was like spiritual, kind of new age, the whole deal. We're sitting in the studio one day because he took his meditation break, comes back. He's fixing up for the session. I'm in the studio. I'm just sitting there. And he just arbitrarily turned to me and he said, John, who do you really like? And I said, Henry, I'm not mainstream listener to these things. I think it's all great, but I like people that are a little bit unusual, a little bit odd. And he said, like who? And I said, did you ever hear of a girl by the name of Joni Mitchell? And he looked at me like a cow at a new gate. And he said, are you kidding me? I said, yeah, have you heard of her? And he goes, John, I'm her producer. He said, she's recording over in Studio C on Saturday. Come over. I go over there. I miss James Taylor about 10 minutes. He had just put down this track on A Case of You on the Blue album. I sat and watched her record All I Really Want and Last Time I Saw Richard. First time I'd ever seen a dulcimer. The experiences that we had during that time, everything was fresh. It was new. It was unexplored territory. You're having dulcimers on records. and stuff. You've got all of these different sounds. We're experimenting. I remember I was so happy because I bought a Farfisa organ. One of the big songs for the Doors was dun, 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 dun. And then the guy hits the button. He goes, oh, oh, and he comes back up. Well, my Farfisa had that sound. You had to hold the keys down live, hit the off button, then hit the off button, you're back on, and it would go, whoa, whoa. And I thought, that was like the epitome of technology at that time. You'd hear something like when they came out with the Moog on Good Vibrations. You can't replicate that in any other way except that piece of machinery. I mean, there was some good stuff going on. Plus, the songs were good. They were melodic. You could sing those things.
You could sing them, and also, because you mentioned Joni Mitchell, I mean, wouldn't you love to be able to write, "I've looked at clouds from both sides now"?
Woman was
I'm
a
like, how in the
blind.
world do you think that
Yeah.
up?
Yep.
You know? And
I
and and
mean,
because it has so many different levels, and you sit back and go, "Whoa, that sounds like a ditty, but it's not
yeah,
a ditty.
no.
It's as deep as anything Thoreau ever wrote."
And that was what the depth was like back then. I mean, we come off of Bob Dylan, crying out loud. It's nonsensical as some of those things were. You have to ask yourself, man, I don't do drugs, but if I can do that, we might have a conversation here, might become a believer. It's like, who
Well, now
knows?
well, now the smell of incense kinda led to you being able to actually did you play with Zeppelin and Led Zeppelin as far as the same events and stuff? Did you meet them, talk
Yeah,
to them?
that was on the that was the Farfisa organ, the same one that the Doors had, playing on that. Now I'll tell you a funny story about that song. We've been blessed. I've played with so many different people that were just such talents, and we toured with Three Dog Night for about 2 weeks in Japan. Played with them a bunch of times here. Jimmy Greenspoon, the organ player, and I became pretty good friends. He came into Nashville one time, and we were just talking about stuff. And I said, well, we were in this group called the Southwest FOB back in Dallas, and we had this regional hit called Smell of Incense. And he went, what? He said, you did Smell of Incense by the West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band? I said, you know those guys? And he goes, John, I was the keyboard player in that band. I said, we played with you at Lou Ann's. We didn't know one another. But it's just the connections between people are astounding. You never know. You run into everybody. So,
Absolutely crazy. I mean, when you heard, because to me, everybody talks about Jimmy Page and
yeah.
Robert Plant's vocals, but
Uh-huh.
me, John Bonham was like a drummer that I've yet to hear. As close
Yeah.
as I've ever come to is Neil Peart, as far as like John Bonham, if you listen to, he played the guitar riff. If you
Yeah.
listen to it, he plays the guitar riff on the
Same
drums.
thing. Ginger Baker was another one that was underrated. My goodness, man. If you can isolate those tracks, man, there were some brilliant people.
Now you see why I wanted to nerd out. See, I'm telling you straight up because I know you're busy and stuff, and we still have a few minutes to go. But we're going to do episode number 2 because I can do nothing but music nerd out with you, Chief.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
I tell you the one that was fun in a sick kind of way was we had this guy come up and he played on our Fables album. His name was Jim Gordon. Well,
Jim Gordon, the drummer
the drummer
from Derek and the Dominoes.
Yep. And he dated, he did that whole thing with Joe Cocker, and he's dated Rita Coolidge and beat the hell out of her or something. I don't know. He ended up marrying a girl by the name of Renee Armand. She was this busty girl that they had signed on A&M, very pretty. And I don't think she really went that far. I'm not for sure how far up the ladder she went, but they ended up being married. Jim, from all the drugs that he had done, he ends up killing his mother. You heard the story about him killing his mother. And then he goes to court and he threatens the judge, and they put him in an institution, and he's been there ever since. And I'm thinking, okay, obviously there were some mental health issues. He's crazy, but he was just as nice to me as he could be. And that's the memory that I've got. I don't pay any attention to this. I'm thinking about Jimmy. No, Jim was a good guy. Well, he kills his mom. Yeah, but he was nice to me.
But you can only know. Remember, it's the whole Maya Angelou thing. It's like people won't remember what you do. They'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so for you, that was that experience. It was like, it's fascinating. Yeah, he did Layla and all of that. Man, that's another one of those things. The first time I heard da-da-da-da-da-da, I'm like, oh my God. That was the first real guitar riff.
Well, there was some seriously good players back during that time, because we were in LA. We left Texas, and there were some good players there. B.W. Stevenson, Roy Wiley Hubbard.
My Maria.
You had all that. So, and B.W. used to come sleep on my couch in L.A. I'm serious. And I introduced him to Carole King because he was right there when we played the Troubadour with her. And I mean, you got these players that you just soak up everything that they've got, because all of a sudden music just simply exploded. And it was great.
You say stuff like that, and I was thinking, like, one of the names you mentioned a while ago, I think the genius of James Taylor is he makes you think anybody can do that, and they can't.
It's very simple, but it's complicated as all get out. Dan Fogelberg's the same way.
Oh, Dan Fogelberg, underrated. Not a big enough deal when that man passed. I mean, one of possibly the clearest tenor voice that's ever existed. And I know we start talking about like Yes, and I can't remember the lead singer of Yes, because I only have so much.
Anderson, John Anderson.
Yeah, John Anderson. Yeah. And that's a different thing. And you can put Geddy Lee and all that stuff. But as far as just the purity of the voice, I don't think anybody touches both.
Well, that's the hard thing about somebody coming in, because again, I don't believe in being in a small pond, being the big fish in a small pond. You got to leave. You got to get into the big pond and be the small fish so you can learn. So that was one of the reasons why we went to LA, because it was such a learning curve there. But man, it's like when I came back to Nashville, I've been playing guitar for most of my life now, since I was 17, 18 years old. I came back here and discovered that I am not a guitar player. I'm a guitar owner. That's about it. They will play you under the table. I remember going, I don't know, maybe I could get a job with the state of Tennessee. I don't know. It's just like, I can't compete. So
yeah, that's a great line right there. That's a great line. Hey, because you said you were the new guy, and you said you and Dan kind of avoided each other and kind of learned to go. When did it turn into a partnership, and I hope a friendship? I don't know.
Dan and I had a very good friendship. It became a friendship when we would travel to various gigs together, and we're singing Peter and Gordon and Everly Brothers and Righteous Brothers, just to warm up, getting ready for the gig. And we discovered we had a natural blend. Dan always sang lead because he had such a great lead voice. I always took harmony because that was where I felt I excelled. And even when we would sing, if I sang song on a record, Dan didn't sing harmony. I had to sing harmony to myself. So that was, it ended up a very unique kind of a situation all the way around. We wrote together. Dan and I we got to the point of where we could read one another's minds. We finished sentences. I was just telling somebody earlier, we didn't fight. Dan and I didn't argue about stuff. Dan was very reasonable. I was very reasonable. It's like, let's just solve this thing. Okay, let's get it done. I'm hungry. I don't want to spend all day on this.
We need a sandwich, Ron. We need it around here.
And so it's like we had that kind of a friendship. I raised his kids, he raised mine. And the only thing that caused it later on to go south was you had so many people that get involved in your career and they kind of wedge in and out.
Mhm.
I mean, I saw this last night. I just, for 15 years or better, I've had a really, really good friend named Cherie Curry out of the Runaways. We talk a couple times a month. We do stuff. We text all the time. We never met until last Saturday. It's the first time we've ever met, And then so last night I pulled up Runaways just to watch the film. And I'm watching the very same things happen. People get involved that shouldn't be there. They weave, they divide, so it happens to everybody.
Well, it is the key to me to England Dan and John Ford Coley. And I'm not saying that because you're sitting here with me. The key is your harmony.
Right.
I mean, your harmony with Dan, and it reminds me, and I say this, if you know the group Dan and Shay, Dan,
Country.
Shay's got this great voice. Shay's got this amazing, tremendous instrument. But it's Dan's harmonies and his ability to do harmonics that are unusual, that
Right.
accentuate
Exactly.
that Shay's thing. And I told them this years ago when I was talking to him. I'm like, you need to go listen to England Dan and John Ford Coley and hear how John Ford finds a way to accentuate, because England, Dan Seals has to go straight.
Right.
He just has to go, here's the melody, and that's what I'm going to do. And it's up to John Ford Coley to find all the waves.
Right.
And that is the genius of that sound you guys had. And I'm not trying to break up the group anymore. There's no group to break up.
Yeah.
But that's what made it all work. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because I wanted to tell you that straight to your face.
Mm. Well, now the interesting thing about Dan is we had different styles. Dan is very pedantic. It's a dun, dun, dun. I'm very syncopated. So it was easy to follow Dan. But there's a thing about mediocrity. You can just follow. But no, you got to make it interesting. So you weave in and out. That to me was the fun of it. And ironically enough, I've never been able to replicate that with anyone else. I've sang on a lot of records, but I've never had that connection like I had with Dan. It was like the brothers sound. You came from the same mother and father, and you've just got that sound like the Beach Boys.
You know what's funny is that, he became known later on with his duets with Marie Osmond.
Right.
But did you notice he did most of the harmonizing with her because it was a different take, right?
Yeah.
So it put him in a situation, because you want to talk about pedantic. She makes Dan look like a tap dancer.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so she's like bang, 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 bang. And so it's interesting how life takes you, and the good Lord puts you in different places.
Because you sing with a girl, unless you got a rubber band, sticking in different places, you can't get that high. You're gonna be lower singing under her, and so that's a little bit easier to do. But because our things and I had a higher voice, I was able to sing above him, and it had that kind of flair.
John, the notes you hit on Nights Are Forever are crazy.
Okay, you want to hear a funny story about that?
Yes, I'd love to.
Okay. When you sing, for those of you that aren't aware, you have a track. The track is the music, and you have the vocal, the harmony. You've got the lead vocal, and then you sing the harmony. Well, I had developed strep throat. I couldn't hear. I'm trying to sing on this record, and Kyle, our producer, he stopped me and he said, "John," he said, "Man," he says, "you're singing sharp." He says, "I've never heard you sing sharp before." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm going to take everything out, Dan's vocal And then when it's time for you to come in, I'm going to cut Dan's vocal out and you just sing the harmony. I sang about a third of that album, not hearing what Dan was doing. But, you get the phrasing, you lock into the phrasing because we were pretty tight on harmonies. It wasn't like a free for all on harmony. And so they took it out and I sang it. And then he said, let's put a third above that. Now I'm singing where only dogs can hear. I mean, it was just like, holy cow. And I remember when the guy came in, Bubba Keith, he's got to sing that high harmony now to round it out. And he's going, I hate you guys. I mean, I hate you. He says, how am I going to reach that? And he's trying to scream. I said, man, you can't scream that thing. You're going to have to falsetto it all the way up. And, but it's like singing with nothing. You're just singing a cappella in essence and having to match it. He goes, okay, we're a little bit loose here on this word. And I'm thinking, okay, we're going to get this done, but we got it done. So,
It's just one of the greatest things. I mean, like I said, those notes when you hit on that night software and you, and now that I know your background, now I start to understand why you would do a Todd Rundgren record.
Yeah.
With Love Is the Answer, because that's when your wheelhouse.
I loved Utopia and Todd Rundgren. He still ranks as my favorite concert that I've ever been to. He was playing down at the Bacchanal in San Diego. And so, knowing his manager and everything, called him up and said, I'm going to go see him. So we were down there. He played by himself, piano, guitar, sometimes a cappella, sometimes he'd play with the track. The only thing that I wanted to have happen was I wanted Todd to shut up, finish his set so I could go home and play. I had never been that inspired in my life. That man just absolutely wiped me dry. So, it's like, okay.
Well, because I did not know that Love Is the Answer was a remake until like a couple of years into it. Once I got into pop radio and somebody had told me, he goes, yeah, it's an old Utopia record. I'm like, really? And so I went and found it. And I'm like, the guy goes, what do you think? I said, you're going to hate me. He goes, why? I said, I like England Dan and John Ford Coley's version better. I think it has more, I'm sorry for me saying this, heart. I think it sounds more like the plea that it is.
Yeah.
Where you listen to the Todd Rundgren things and it's like, and if you feel afraid, I mean, there's no angst there.
Yeah.
And when you guys get to that kick where, and if you've lost your way, and then Dan comes in with the angry voice, and then you go to the falsetto, and it's like that to me is there should be some angst. There should be some, oh my gosh, everything's going wrong. What the heck are we doing? Love is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your version more. And I know sacrilegious, and I'm sure I'll get letters.
I'm glad you did. I mean, I looked at it like this. For me, everything's fun. There's got a comedic effect in just about everything. And I think, well, you know what? If we hadn't done that song, maybe Liv Tyler would have never become a great actress, because she was raised by Todd Rundgren and her mother. And that was about the time Love Is the Answer came out. I had to make him a bunch of money. So he was able to support that girl, probably give her acting lessons. And, I'm thinking, yeah, man, it was all me,
But that's such a beautiful way of thinking about it. And the truth of it is you've been alive enough to know that math works.
Yeah.
That you're not wrong. Right? That you're like, okay, if we have A squared plus B squared, we're going to get C squared.
Yeah, somewhere along the line.
It's just amazing.
I want to tell you why I am all in on Bison Junk. First and foremost, they are a full-service, eco-friendly junk removal company, but with this difference. They focus on recycling and donating usable goods. Their customer service sets them apart, and they pride themselves on their integrity. They'll show up when they say they will, and they'll do what they promise. If you have hard-to-remove items like hot tubs or large furniture, they figure it out so you don't have to. They want to be who you always come back to when it's time to declutter and organize your home or business. They're worth every penny at bisonjunk.com. Sterling Oak Cabinetry has one goal: to build the cabinets of your dreams. They literally specialize in custom cabinetry. No cookie cutter, everything looks the same stuff that you find at the big box stores. Your kitchen is the centerpiece of your home, and your home is your biggest investment. They can work with you or your designer to build just what you want with the materials and finish that you want. And because they're a brand new company, they'll be getting busier and busier, but if you order right now, they'll get your order to you in 6 to 8 weeks. In the world of cabinetry, that's blindingly fast. Contact Rob Scovman at rskovmand@yahoo.com or go to sterlingoakcabinetry.com and get your dreams made reality tomorrow.
And I know I'm pilfering your time right now, and I promise I'll wrap this up.
It's fine. We're doing good.
Well, I want to get your thing, but when and you said as it goes, and then Dan goes on his way. And did you guys have contact before he passed?
Yes,
did
we
you
did.
had a chance to reconcile, or I mean, was there even a reconciliation needed?
We were reconciled before. I mean, Dan and I, we had a hard breakup. I don't talk about it because I've got my side, Dan's got his side. Dan's not here. If I were to talk about it, in my estimation, it's not a very honorable thing to do because he can't defend himself. So it's done.
I respect that. That's why I would never even ask you on that thing. That's why I asked you if you just reconciled, because I 100% agree.
Before he passed away, Dan gave me a call. And we've been trying to get a hold of one another. And it was just Danny and John, that was it. And I have no regrets. I've got no anger. I've got no angst about any of it. It's like, no, Dan was my friend. I love the man to death. That was it.
Isn't that beautiful? And that's all you want, really, because the truth of it is you two humans have memories that anybody else, it's a story. For you, it's life.
Yeah. But, we had a lot of good stuff. If Dan and I had not gone the path that we went, I mean, who knows where you would be.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen. And I'm a firm believer in, when I was talking with somebody the other day, they said, well, I'm afraid doing this is going to do this. And I go, but what if it doesn't?
Uh-huh.
You're just going to miss the opportunity. So
and what if it leads to something that you can't even imagine?
Exactly.
Right? Like
exactly.
My favorite saying is, nothing ever turns out the way you think it will. Good or bad.
Absolutely. You're right. That's a very true statement.
And so you might as well take the shot or whatever, especially when it comes to the entertainment industry. And I've always said this, and I think this has always been the best thing about my journey in this, because I've been doing it a long time, is I never expected the business to owe me one thing. That when it was done with me, it's done with me.
It's done.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing, is that, especially it's like, I love the fact that you're still out there singing. I love the fact that you're still out there singing Nights Are Forever, and it's hard to belong to someone, and all the great hits. And I love that. I still pull you up and watch you do live performances and stuff. It's amazing how few, because it really wasn't the age of video. Very few performances of you and Dan singing live, or things like that. And I'm like, well, shucks, I wish there were more.
At that particular time, we didn't fit into that video thing. We were just for it. And I think about people passing all the time. There are two biblical phrases, one New Testament and one Tanakh, that have pretty much clarified for me what being in the entertainment industry is like. Well, one is when Yeshua says, many will come in my name saying, Lord, Lord, look at all the wonderful things that I've done. And I will tell you, get away from me. I don't know who you are. That one scares me because, again, you've done all this stuff and you think you're all this in a bag of chips, but really, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
The other one scares me even worse is in Exodus, where it says, and there arose a new king in Egypt who did not know who Joseph was. And I remember doing a crossword puzzle, a TV guide crossword puzzle. Here's all these people that I know growing up on them. Gone. Nobody remembers them. All these great artists that have done things, they're gone. Their time's up. No one remembers them. And you kind of go, what kind of an impact are you really making on all of this stuff? Because Gordon Lightfoot passed away recently. Gary Wright. Gary and I go back a long way. Danny Lane and I go back a long way. Nobody talks about him. You're gone. Because every little pissant podunk prairie punk that can pick up a guitar thinks they're going to be the next thing. And I think about this, I'm very kind of philosophical, because again, you realize, well, the impact that you make, what are you really making? What kind of the only thing that you've made an impact on somebody is when they come up to you and they go, yeah, we used to make out, to your music. This is my son, John. And you go,
and my daughter, Ford.
Okay, you got something there. But,
well, it's absolutely right. And those are powerful things. I'm so thrilled you shared that with me. And that's what I've said all along. I read this a long time ago that we are 75 years from being completely forgotten.
Absolutely.
75 years. That your memory will last. So that's what makes the Lincolns and the Jesuses and the Caesars and those guys who are timeless. But think about how many billions of people have lived on this earth. And there's only a handful of people that we remember.
I am a historian. I love history, and I study.
Oh, you and me, man, we're going to be best friends, John. I need to move to Nashville so we can just hang out.
We'll sit and hang out. Yeah, go to Starbucks and drink coffee all day. But I go to cemeteries a lot, and I'm always fascinated by what I call the dash. Born 1862, died 1890. Well, did you have children? Did you, what? Did you farmer? What? And that kind of stuff. You think about it. What are we doing here? You've got this amount of time. You never know, especially if you don't study your ancestry, who your family rubbed shoulders with. I mean, I know my ancestry. I've studied it. I can tell you things. I've got one lady that does my stuff. She says, you're just a DNA overachiever is all you are, because the family's been involved in all of these things. But I said this the other night I was played in Richmond, Virginia. Okay. I had two great 10th grade grandfathers at Jamestown, right? One of them saved Jamestown in 1622 from the massacre. I said, I've got this ancestry in this history from just right down the street. The thing that I have learned about my ancestry is that with my ancestry and having exact change will get me on any bus in Richmond. That's how important it is. And you just kind of, and the same thing with music. I had a guy, Randy Gerson. He went on to do the Titanic, and who was the guy the director? He worked on
James
all
Cameron.
Cameron. He did all this stuff. Okay, I'm out of music, and I'm thinking I'm going to go into the record industry itself and work from the inside out. And he said, John, and I was 40, and he said, John, I'm 30 years old. They consider me a dinosaur here. because I'm not going out to all the clubs. I'm not finding all the acts and everything. He says, you know how important music is? And I bet. And he said, you know that if we sell 1 million records, we throw parties, we jump up and down, we pat one another on the back. We sold 1 million records. And he says, now you realize that's only $1 million worth of records. It's actually only 500,000 physical copies of the thing. He said, most of the time we can't sell 100,000. He said, do you know how important music is? And again, I bet. And he said, outside that door in Los Angeles, there's over 13 million people. There's about 280 million people in the United States at that time. And he said, and we think we're hot stuff because we can sell 1 million copies. I went, okay. You're depressing as hell. You know that? But that's the deal. You know, we used to, when you and I were younger, we lived by the radio. The Beatles' new records coming out. This coming out. We loved this. Everybody knew the DJs' names, etc. Not now.
No.
It's not important to this generation. It was important to our generation.
Well, and the numbers don't even mean what they think they mean anymore. I mean, I just
It's
saw this
inflated.
week. They had Randy Houser and Russell Dickerson. I love those guys. Love them. I think Randy Houser has possibly one of the best country music I've ever heard. One of the best voices. They got plaques for 1 billion streams. Now, it seems like you should be able to turn 1 billion streams into a whole bunch of money. But
Right.
what they got were plaques. Right?
Yeah. That's it. Well,
And that's it.
even if you look at during the time we're selling records, they're selling vinyl records for $3. Now you make $1 million off of that. That says something. Well, now they're $20, and they're still working off the same. Well, you sold 1 million records. And you go, yeah, but you don't really have any blood in the ground. You know, it's like,
well, now you as well as I do, it's all changed. The paradigm's changed. Now you have to tour. The records is nothing but a tour generator, and that's where you have to go and play all these shows now and just.
But the money that they're making, that's where you make money, is when you tour. Because these guys, we never dreamed of making the amount of money that somebody who's got one record made. It would take us, 10 dates to make what they're making on one date now with 4 hit records. And they got the one. It's just different, I don't begrudge. I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
So.
And life changes, and that's what I was saying, is that the best thing, as like in the country music industry, is that the sound keeps changing. What happened to the rock industry is that they stopped. You think about it, the top 3-4 touring acts in rock music are 75 to 85 years old, John.
Yeah. You're right.
mean, Mick Jagger and those guys are on tour right now. Right. They are 80 years old. Roger Daltrey's on tour with Pete Townsend. They are 80 years old. Even the young guys like the Foo Fighters are in their 50s, closing in on 60.
Yeah. I went to go see the Stones a couple of years ago down in Austin.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, it was my first experience with them. I watched Mick Jagger. It was a 2-hour show, and he was probably maybe halfway through that show, a little bit more. And I could see him starting to fade. And I was down close. And I watched that man literally kick himself into gear and finish that show with as much energy as he stepped out on that stage with. I was never so impressed just with that one action alone. It's like, nope, I'm a professional, and by golly, this is how we do it. And I'm up with kids all the time now, and it's like, okay, just.
Do you still want to be doing this at 80? Do you see what it takes?
Yeah, it takes a lot. I mean, people don't realize what is involved. Remember the series that they did called Vinyl?
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of years. They actually had us the milk carton kids played Dan and I. It was really so funny. They called up and they said, "Well, we need a license to do the song Simone." It was like, "Okay, sure." Then they said, "We also need a likeness release." And I said, "What do you need a likeness release for?" And they said, "Well, we've got 2 actors that are going to be playing you and Dan in the series." And I said, "Wait a minute, you're going to have somebody pretending to be me?" They said, "Yeah, in the studio singing the song." And I said, "Okay, well, that changes things. Okay, number one, I want somebody who looks like a young Robert Redford and straighten his teeth, you know?" And so they got these guys. They did a great job. And so I was one day I was out and a lady said, is it really that dirty in this industry?" And I said, "No, man, they whitewashed it." It's wretched, you know?
And it
So,
was, I mean, you forget about the organized crime. You forget about the unsavory characters. You do your history study. Tommy James and the Shondells, they were
absolutely.
run by the Chicago Mafia.
Yeah, well, Chicago, those guys
Mhm.
are so, and it's just, that's just the way that it is. We get in it for the music. They're in it for business. It's we're light years apart from one another. There's polar opposites. I just want to play music. When I caught on to how things were being run and I
Yeah.
was acting on it, I cut my own throat because nope, you're supposed to be pretty and stupid. That's all we want from you. Sit down, shut up. We'll call you from the corner if we need you. But I was learning stuff and it wasn't adding up to me. And I was kind of vocal and they got rid of me. So I've seen it happen to other people too.
Hey, here's my thing about Americans and really Americans, but we can say the world in general. You know what nobody likes to do, John? Math. Nobody likes to do math.
Mm.
And when you start doing math and start realizing that 2 plus 4 does not equal purple,
No, not at all. Not at all. You
then you
know?
start going, hey, hold on. And you're exactly right. Things are there's the seedy side to any underbelly in the music.
Yeah,
And really a lot of times it's a shame that these these things that are talented. That's the best thing I think the internet has done is that it's easier to get your word out. I mean, you got a kid like Zach Bryan, who's one of the biggest stars in music right now, who literally was just him and a guitar on a Navy ship, right? And he was able to get his songs out. So you have that access now, but you don't have the power of a record company that can push you, good or
right.
bad,
Right.
right?
Right. The record companies, they've kind of been neutered. But then again, though, you got to understand, I've been around this industry since I was 15 years old. You've got the artist who really wants to just play music. And then you've got the people that just want to sell something. And they don't care whether they're selling porno toys or pool tables. They just want to sell something. And if you're not selling, bingo, you're they don't care about the music. They really don't.
Who are just off the top of your head, and I ask people questions like this because if you can't think of it off the top of your head, was it really your favorites? Right? You
Uh-huh.
can say, "Hey, I'm gonna think about this. I'm gonna give you a week and then come back and tell me what you think." I don't think that's honest.
Yeah.
But if you could go see anybody in concerts that and alive or dead, I'm just saying
Uh-huh.
that. Who would be, let's say, anywhere in the top 5? Any of the top 5, you could just do 2 or 3. You could go, "This is what I'd wanna see," because as a music nerd, and I say that lovingly because I am one too, I'm fascinated by your answers.
Well, there's all kinds of people that I toured with. Remember, I've seen everything from the side of the stage, and I don't watch them just for pure pleasure. If I go to a concert, I'm there to steal. I mean, let's just face it. Somebody said something, I go, "Oh, that's funny," and I write it down. Uh, but I mean, people like Bread. I toured with those
David
guys for
Gates.
David Gates. I love those guys to death. If they were to call me, I know 3 of them are passed away. if David were to call me and say, John, I'm going out, I wouldn't ask him how much. I wouldn't ask him anything. I just say, I'm packed. Where do you want to go?
He's a rancher here in Northern California now.
Yeah. Well, you got Elton John. Elton John treated us so well. And I've had people say to me, well, yeah, but I mean, he stands for this and he does that. And I go, I don't care. He's my friend. I mean, that guy, he was so good to us. I'm not going to bash him. He can have his own opinions. I don't care. Three Dog Night was another good one.
Man, those guys could sing. What a crazy thing of having three lead singers.
I just saw Danny Hutton recently. He was down in Greenville. I was in Sedona. My friend told me, and I said, well, heck, I got tomorrow off. And I just jumped on the plane, came down to Dallas, and we went over to go see him. 80 years old. He was 80 then, just 2 years ago. He sang better than he ever sang. It's Danny. It's just Danny, And you look at that and go, man, just the pure magnitude of the number of hit songs and recordings that you guys had, and they're still flying today. That's a real testimony. But you're good people, and I look for good people.
Which one passed? There was Danny, and there was Chuck Negron.
Yeah, Chuck's still playing. He's sick. Corey was the nicest guy. We like I said, we opened for these guys. Three Dog breaks up. Corey is opening for Dan and I, just an acoustic guitar. He's on A&M Records. He comes over. He's opening for us. He was so appreciative, so thankful. I saw them probably 15 years ago in Providence, Rhode Island. I went over and said, Corey, man, it's been so long. And he said, man, thank you for letting me open up for you guys during that time. He says, that was so helpful for me. And I went, God, man, you don't make people like that. They remember stuff.
Crazy. And he was, and everything I've ever read, he's the nicest guy. Didn't drink, didn't do anything. He loved fishing. That was his thing. I just want to fish. That's all I want to do is fish. And he's that voice. If you know Three Dog Night, Shambhala, Mama Told Me Not to Come. That's Corey. Yeah. And just his ability to hit those things. And then Chuck had his battles with drugs, and Danny, I believe Danny was Eli Cumming, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not for sure. Danny said he mainly sang the low harmony. Now he's having to sing all the high stuff. And he says, I sing every day, singing better now than I ever have. And it's just great to run across these people, because the one thing that I am very pleased about, especially going out with these yacht rock tours, everyone knows it's not 1976 anymore. Okay? It's like we're here to enjoy ourselves. I mean, we're all different. We're eating at the buffet. We're taking naps, And the funniest things, people come up to us and they say, oh, we saw you in such and such a time. This is my grandson. And you go,
I tell you a couple of things. My wife puts on big events for a big Silicon Valley company here. Yeah. And it was just recently. And her act was Elton John.
Yeah.
And she met him, and I said, how was he? Because she knows I've been a fan forever, but obviously I didn't make the cut for free tickets. That's another story.
Yeah.
But I said, how is he? And she goes, very frail. He's very frail. She goes, but I'll tell you this. About 15 minutes into the set, when he could feel the energy of the audience, she goes, honey, he turned into Elton John.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, because it's not 1976.
Yeah.
But it's like the Michael Jordan quote. I couldn't win a game of one-on-one, or couldn't win a game today, but I can beat anybody for 2 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you get up and you're when you step on that stage, a lot of times you go into rote, but by golly, you know where you are. You know what you're going to do, and you don't get stuck. You've got so many rabbits to pull out of your hat. Something, guitar string breaks. You got a story. This doesn't go right. You got a story. You can cover everything. And there's a real advantage in that. You know, I feel bad for these poor kids now because we played clubs. We had to really work our way. We learned our craft. These poor kids now go straight from the living room into the studio, onto the stage, and die a miserable death because something happens. They don't know where to go. And they're standing in front of hundreds of thousands of people. We're playing for 15 people. You know, you work out your stuff. They don't get that opportunity and they're gone. And I feel bad for them.
My business partner was talking to Luke Combs. I'm sure you know who he is.
Yeah.
This is when Luke first came out. And he told him, anytime you get a chance to play, even if it's just you and the bartender, you play.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? And so it's fascinating on that. I have one more musical questions and I'm gonna let you go. I promise. On Love Is the Answer, you just told me that Dan played sax. Did he play that sax or did you bring a guy in?
That was Ernie Watts.
Okay.
Ernie Watts played that.
It's fascinating to know that.
Well,
I'm telling you, go ahead.
The hard thing for me to learn was that you think, let's just take the Beach Boys, for example. One of the most astounding groups ever. One of my first loves. Dennis plays drums, Carl plays guitar, you know, Mike sings, Brian plays bass. Not on the records.
The Wrecking
That
Crew.
was Joe Osborne. That was Hal Blaine. That was, you know, all these
Glenn
guys.
Campbell.
So you find the best guys to play. Steve Lukather's playing on Love Is the Answer. So is Lee Ritenour. You got the Gilstrap singers. Ed Green played with Steely Dan. You pick the good guys because they play together all the time and they lock in stuff. Now, I've played on a bunch of the stuff that we do, but still, I mean, you come into something like that, you can add stuff, you know, but let the pros do it.
Well, because that lives forever, right? The live show is going to be just the 2 hours you're there, but the record is going to be there forever.
And also, if you've got an ego, you go, well, you know, I didn't play on that. So-and-so played on that. But it's England Dan and John Ford Coley, and nobody has a clue who played on that thing. They think you did. So what difference does it make?
And when they see you live, you did.
You did. And I still play live. I mean, I get people telling me all the time, I had no idea that you could play the piano like that. And I said, well, yeah, I was trained, but, you know, if it comes into the studio, yeah, I'll play, especially because I do such intricate things, even on guitar. And I've had difficulty because I damaged my thumb and I can't finger pick like I used to. So it's frustrating. You call somebody in that can do it because this is going on the record. This is going to live forever. Whether it's got your name is playing on that or not, it doesn't matter because most people don't know.
Do you know how much I've enjoyed this hour?
Thank you.
I only had you for 30 minutes, so I thank you for your generosity because as you can tell, I can't lie. I was excited about this, and I think you picked up on that.
Well, I hope you're not disappointed. You know,
do I sound disappointed to you, John?
Well, I hope not. So, you know, I mean, you could be doing the industry thing on me right now going, right, babe, okay, babe, yeah, good, babe.
No, listen, the fact that I know all the things you're talking about and all the things and the questions that I have, as I told you when we first talked, before we went on, you said, what we're going to talk about? And I'm like, I got no idea, John.
Yeah,
I got no idea.
That's what I like.
We are going to have a conversation.
I've been doing interviews all day, and most people get very, very nervous because musicians are known for monosyllables. Yes, no, right. So you ask me what time it is, I'll tell you how to build a watch. I just can't stop, you know. So.
Well, and I just love it because you have all the stories that I want to try to pull out of you. I mean, hearing this stuff and, you know, my God, the names that we brought up, Joni Mitchell and Chicago and David Clayton Thomas and all these different names. Oh my gosh. How much fun was this for me?
Well,
I don't know about you, but for me, it was a delight.
It's an interesting world and I don't like not being involved in it. because again, there's just so many fascinating things that go on. There's people that can teach you things. That's again why I said the small pond and the big pond, big fish, small. I'd rather be in a small pond, a big pond. I'm learning something, you know?
Well, thank you. Thank you for being part of the soundtrack to my life, along with
Well,
so
thank
many
you.
others. And thank you for the artistry that, like I said, it was your harmonies that made the thing work, in my opinion. I love Dan
Mm,
Seal's voice. I love it. It was amazing. But it was
Thank you.
your harmonies that made it work. That's what made England Dan and John Ford Coley a thing. And I'm delighted in this time.
Okay, well, let's do it again.
Don't threaten me with a
You're in
good time,
Northern
Chief.
California?
Yeah, San
Where,
Jose. San
t-
Jose, when you hear
okay.
Silicon Valley, that's San
Yeah.
Jose.
Well, my daughter lived in San Jose. She just moved there 2 years ago and lives in Gilroy with her family.
Well, good.
You know,
We're going to come out here and visit your daughter, and you and me, we're going to have a day.
let's do it. We'll do it.